you, Madam Chairman and members of the commission. Happy to be here with you today. I really have the pretty significant update for you, and that is the progress of our fee increase rule has been before the Government Operations Committee and has moved through that step. Through much discussion, many different procedural motions, ultimately the joint session of the Government Relations Committee passed our rule through with no recommendation. That's one option that they could have done. They could have given us a positive recommendation on the rule, they could have given us a negative recommendation on the rule, or they could give no recommendation. Ultimately, by giving no recommendation, the rule moves forward uninhibited. We will have one final step next legislative session when the full General Assembly considers the rule omnibus bill. But basically what I'm telling you is everything's on the right track in that regard, and a big thanks to Commissioner Cannon for being present through that hearing, and Director Carter and the rest of the staff that helped go through the presentation, or go through the preparation for the presentation that we were able to make to the committee. So that is the extent of the government relations report that I have for you. All positive news. And with that, Madam Chairman, I'll entertain any questions that the commission has.
Thank you, Chris. And I want to first thank you, but also thank Commissioner Cannon for his presence there that day. It ended up being more important than we all realized, given the shifting environmental conditions. And so I'd like to recognize Commissioner Cannon to talk about that experience, and I'm sure share some words of appreciation.
I believe the commission wishes that I spoke as well here as I did there that day. I said absolutely nothing. So, Chris, you did a remarkable job at, first and foremost, at building relationships, because it's one thing to say stuff, but it's another thing to say those things with people you have relationships with. And what you have done to bridge those relationships was very, very evident. And through your efforts, we are very, very trusted. Even though some disagree with what we're trying to propose, it's not a matter of trust. It's a matter of, I think, perception on some of the facts. I have been in some of the media, even some of the comments on the Hill. There seems to be 2 or 3 things floating around about what we can and cannot do, from ammo tax to investments. Would you mind speaking to that, just so it's clear for everyone? So
Certainly. One of the concerns that was raised both in the Government Operations Committee and in recent news article, there's some confusion surrounding the federal funding that the agency receives and how that interplays with the state dollars, and how the general thought is that we get money from ammo tax, which is true. In fact, we get it in 2 different sources. One is the state of Tennessee's ammunition tax, which comes to the agency. That was at one of its highest levels last fiscal year, in the neighborhood of $530,000. The Government Operations Committee and certain media outlets seem to have confused the Tennessee ammunition tax with the federal excise tax on ammunition and sporting related equipment that comes in the form of our wildlife restoration dollars. As Assistant Director Sumners has reported, those dollars associated with the sport fish restoration and the wildlife restoration are at some of their highest levels, I think maybe the highest levels in the history of the agency. So while there are more federal dollars available, that total of $33 million federal allocation to the state of Tennessee does not come in the form of a lump sum check that this agency then gets to spend. That has been a confusing issue for some. And it's important to be clear that while that money is available to the state, we cannot access or utilize that money without having state dollars to match those funds in order to draw them down. Additionally, it's confusing to some. They believe that that money can be spent on anything. And as the commission knows, those dollars, whether they're sport fish restoration dollars or wildlife restoration dollars, can only be spent on very specific approved projects. So to say that we have had a very good year when it comes to federal allocation is very true, and we're excited about the prospects of what we may be able to do with that money. But to say we've had a huge financial windfall this year is really not accurate.
investment-wise, could you update us on the status of the legislation that the state treasurer was doing, and I think we were kind of the catalyst for that effort going forward.
We were, and when we started discussions with the state treasurer and with certain members of the General Assembly, we talked about a bill that would have been specific to the TWRA that would have allowed the state treasurer more flexibility in investing our dollars. It actually morphed into a bigger discussion, and there were other state agencies that were interested in having that same flexibility. So the state treasurer did pass a broader bill that will encompass and include TWRA and give more flexibility in the investment of both our endowment funds and our reserves. I have not gotten a meeting with the state treasurer to find out exactly when those dollars will be invested, but I can tell the commission that the law has passed, and we will have increased flexibility, and we can anticipate an increased rate of return. Now, there's a lot of people that say, great, the state treasurer has our money, he's going to be able to invest it and get a rate of return like he's getting on the Tennessee Consolidated Retirement System, which he's doing maybe the best in the nation on. Our funds are different, and our funds are considered state dollars, which comes with a constitutional prohibition against investing those dollars in equities. So while we will have more flexibility, anticipating a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10% rate of return it's just not possible in the current market. So it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out, and we're hopeful to maximize the return that we can get on those investments. But it comes with a layer of we have to temper our expectations and understand what we're dealing with as far as the Constitution is concerned.
Chairman Woodson, just one more comment related to this whole process. This is for the staff first. In January, we did our best to thank you. This has been a hard road that we have gone down. It began a year ago this month, I believe, the actual going down the road. It had been talked about, but we began it a year ago this month. What you all helped this agency and this commission accomplish, we thank you so much. And those words just they're not enough. We know that you have been through heck at times trying to figure out, well, how can we cut here? How can we bring things in line? And you have accomplished remarkable feats that the public, I don't think, appreciates because they hadn't seen a change in service. And to that, I'm going, then we did good. We did very, very good. But I know it's been hard. And some of the talk of the doomsday stuff, if we didn't get increases, I know that's even harder because you have worked so hard for years to get us in the fiscally sound position that we're in. So I don't say this lightly, and I think I speak for the entire commission, budget committee, the whole 9 yards. Thank you for your efforts. There's fruit. This process is finally bearing some fruit. To the budget committee, we began this about a year ago, and I don't know how many meetings we had, 7 or 8, but what you all did, your participation, your active participation. Bill, you facilitated that meeting with the treasurer. You made that happen, and you can be thanked for the legislation that is going forward to allow us to invest these dollars better. For your all's patience, thank you. To this commission as a whole, Mr. Chairman, you too. Thank you all for locking arms with us. It's been a tough road. It's been a good road, and I think we've ended up at a good place. But for me not to say thank you to these groups would be wrong. So to each of you, thank you so very, very much. I think we did some good things, some pretty important things for the state and for the folks that we serve.
Thank you, Commissioner, and excellent work to you both. Chairman Bledsoe.
Chris, we really appreciate all you done, and everybody brags on you down on the Hill, and that says a lot. So was there any other legislation affecting the agency that made it through this year? I know we had a restitution bill or something.
We did. The restitution bill that was passed by Senator Jim Tracy will allow for more increased fines, if you will, for illegally taking big game animals. The bill itself passed, it includes a scale, but it applies to white-tailed deer, to wild turkey, and to elk. And it will allow judges more flexibility in ordering a restitution based, And the bill itself has a scale on how the animals are valued. But in those higher profile cases, and those cases where the judge needs to swing a little bit bigger hammer, he'll now have the flexibility to do that. And hopefully that's going to increase the deterrent for the illegal activity and move towards, well, reducing poaching was the focus of the bill, and also increasing the public safety. The specific focus had to do with shooting from a road. And if our judges, if we can educate them and we can educate the public that this type of activity is not going to be tolerated through a monetary fine, it should go a long way towards changing some of the issues that we're facing in Tennessee.
Any other questions?
If I could,
Yes,
Madam Chairman,
Chris.
just add, Commissioner Cannon and Chairman Bledsoe, you've been very kind and complimentary to me, and I got to tell you that I appreciate it very much. But the relationships and the progress that we've been able to make in the legislature, I get to take a lot of credit for it. But it's a result of having an agency that's very responsive to the concerns, that's very good about providing me with the information that I need to get to members of the General Assembly. And it's also a product of having a commission that is very, very good about recognizing the importance of those relationships and helping me foster them. So thank you for your thanks, but I got to give a lot of credit to the agency and to all of you sitting up here. So
Thank you, Chris. Any other, Commissioner Cox?
Other than the people we have individually contacted, do you have legislators key legislators that really we need to thank, or write a letter or call or something? Would you provide those to individuals in their area, or however you want to do that? If there are some that really went to bat for us?
I'll be happy to do that. And again, I think that the recommendation that came out of the Government Operations Committee with our fee rule, being a neutral recommendation or no recommendation, indicates that we still have some work to do. And there's still some concerns that need to be addressed, and I will continue to work throughout the summer to address those. And certainly I will. We have had some very strong support and some advocates that we need to give our thanks to for that support.
So I was going to bring that up. When I got Commissioner Cannon's email, I was pretty happy. I went and watched the tape on the meeting, and I didn't come away with a warm and fuzzy feeling about the way y'all were treated, although you did a great job. But to your credit, after when I talked to you, the things that needed to be addressed with those people that had problems have been addressed, and the ones that could be convinced have been convinced, and the others probably never will be. So thank you. Good job.
We'll continue working with those folks that aren't quite there yet to provide them whatever information we can.
Great. Commissioner Cox, that's a wonderful idea. I think one, in terms of maybe the list of thanks, but also, Chris, put your head on in terms of there's between now and the next 30, 60 days over the summertime, maybe think about a plan for appropriate engagement from us to members to seek clarification how we can work with you and support you. I'm confident that any member of the commission, if you thought it was wise for us to have a particular focus, but so one on sort of specific letters maybe from the chairman and the commission, and then any assignments, we would welcome anything I can do to help facilitate those. I'll do it.
Thank you
Okay?
very much.
Sure. Any other questions? Great. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, back to you.
Thank you, Chairman Woodson. Moving on to the Budget Committee, Chairman Harold Cannon.
Yes, I did.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One comment to Commissioner Cox.
Tim's.
It was not a warm and fuzzy meeting by any means. But at the end of it all, we felt good, and we celebrated with big old tall milkshakes. So that was, Mr. Chairman, yesterday, the Budget Committee heard a presentation by Tim Cleveland regarding a budget expansion in the amount of $10,000 for the Montgomery County Shooting Complex, an expansion to it. The funds for this are all hunter education funds. Based on the presentation and our vote, the committee and I recommend approval of a budget expansion of $10,000 for Montgomery County shooting.
Motion has been made by Commissioner Cannon, seconded by Commissioner Swan, on the budget expansion of $10,000 for hunt. Any discussion from the commission? Any from the audience? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Budget expansion of $10,000 for the Montgomery County Shooting Complex carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Cleveland also presented a budget expansion in the amount of $50,000 for the Scholastic Clay program field at Haley, help me again. Thank you, Haley Jacob. The funding for this is all federal dollars. After the presentation, the committee unanimously approved this, and based on that, I and the committee recommend approval of the $50,000 budget expansion for the SCTP.
Motion's been made, seconded by Commissioner Swan. Any discussion from the commission? Any from the audience? All in favor of the budget expansion of $50,000, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Budget expansion of $50,000 for the Scholastic Clay Target Field at Haley Jacob passes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yesterday, Barry Sumner's presented a budget expansion in the amount of $1,750,000 as part of the fiscal year 16 budget for the purchase of the McCart track in Morgan County. This will be a mixture of Pittman-Robertson funds as well as what we would call the local share being covered by the property owner. I believe Mr. Sumner's may have had some clarification or on the acreage on that.
Yes, sir, let me, I'll put my two-slide slideshow here. Updates, okay. I did update the acreage figures at the top of the maps on these two slides to reflect only the acres that we're proposing to acquire. The McCart tract in Morgan County being 1,753 acres.
Mr. Chairman, the committee voted and unanimously approved this budget expansion yesterday on behalf of the committee. I recommend approval of this budget expansion to purchase the McCart track in Morgan County for $1,750,000.
Motion been made and seconded by Commissioner Swan. Any discussion from the commission? Any discussion from the audience? All in favor of the budget expansion of $1,750,000, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Budget expansion of $1,750,000 for the McCart track in Morgan County, 1,753 acres, carries.
Will this be automatically added to Catoosa? Same rules and
Yes,
regulations?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we had a good day on land yesterday. We also heard a presentation regarding a budget expansion in the amount of $3,750,000 as part of the FY16 budget for Buffalo Ridge Track in Humphreys County, 100% funding of federal with the local share being covered by the property owner as well. I believe Director Carter or Barry want to speak to this, and we'll have some clarification on acreage, or you just need a clarification on acreage.
For the acreage, the owner is keeping part of this property, so the acreage that we intend to acquire is 1,703 acres.
Director Carter, is there anything you wanted to add, or?
Mr. Chairman, it'd be at your discretion, but yesterday you said you'd like to know a little bit more about the property. To that extent, I'll just quickly tell you that Tom Beasley is the owner of the property, and Tom's been before the commission in the past. You have actually honored him for the things that he has done in promotion, especially in recruitment of young people, becoming outdoor women, wounded warriors, a bunch of specialty hunts, and he literally has just turned that property over to the agency for the last number of years, and it has been utilized in that way. In the discussions with Mr. Beasley, he said I would like to help the agency out. I'll make the match on this by lowering the price to do that of what he would ordinarily get for the sale of that property. He says, my request, however, would be that it continue on to be as an education type property. And I told him that I felt that that would be fine with the commission. And it's going, what he is requesting is that we continue to use it primarily for those type of hunts, for recruitment hunts, for access handicap type hunters. And it is actually laid out with several, I think about 10 miles of road that is accessible in that way now. And you also ask a little bit more about how the property might look. If you want to, Freddie Couch, Captain Couch is probably most familiar with that property, he and Don Hossey, and he has 5 or 6 slides that he can show you what the property looks like and how it lays if you want to see that.
Thank you, Director Carter. With the Commission's blessing, I think it'd be good to see this. This is a heck of a gift to us.
Captain Couch?
Just turn that one off.
Do what?
Turn this slideshow off.
Get to the desktop, put that. Well.
It's not a presentation, it's just some slides I gathered to show y'all that some of the different hunts, the juvenile hunts, the statewide juvenile hunts that have been held there since 1998, I believe was the first year. It's hard to calculate exactly how many juveniles harvested their first deer there, but it's, I would say, easily over 300 in the time that we've been on Mr. Beasley's property. There's 5, the ramp is not missing because this one's not installed yet, but there's 5 handicap shooting blinds, wheelchair accessible, that are already there in 40 ladder stands. This doesn't do this justice. It's a huge barn that where the facilities that he's just pretty much given us free reign, like Ed said, of the property and all of his facilities. He even paid for, this is a bunkhouse for the volunteers for the agency to stay in to save the state money from having to stay in hotels, but this is just some of the pictures. Juvenile. Part of it is crop. I don't know the exact percentage, but most of it's wooded. Soldiers from Fort Campbell's Wounded Warrior Unit. I think it's eight years we've had that. Mr. Beasley actually has planted the native grasses. He's really into restoring the wildlife, and the quail is one of them. And I don't know what he spent on planting native grasses, and we've maintained them by burning them every so many years, in rotation. There's also been the Outdoor Woman. It gives the women opportunity, and everybody knows if Mama likes to hunt, then everybody's going to hunt. So that's one of the deer stands, and there's another one, but it's quality, very, very quality piece of property with quality wildlife. I mean, the deer are there, and it's just, these pictures don't do it justice, but it's a really pretty place.
Have you done a quail count, see how many coveys of quail?
I've only seen 2. There was more, and they kind of disappeared, but currently that I could find just recently was two coveys. But the habitat is there. Some of it, we planted so much in the native grasses that it's hard keeping up with the burning. It's actually it's gotten so thick we've had to thin it down with the Clint Borum is assisting us on trying to get that back under control. But this, I didn't show you any of the pictures of the big deer. I just brought the pictures of the little one. I think 109 deer in 3 hunts was the most we ever harvested off this one tract of property, and it's normally 60 or 70, and they're everywhere. Anybody have any other questions?
Any questions from the commission? Any questions from the public?
I got a question. It sounds like this guy's done great things with this property. Would it not be appropriate to name this area after him? Instead of calling it Buffalo Ridge, if we purchase this property, we ought to honor this guy that he's went out of his way and done so much to help our wildlife. I think it's a great story.
Director Carter, Cheryl, if you could guide us on that,
Yes, sir.
that's a great idea.
I talked with Mr. Beasley about that, and I think that's a very good suggestion. And he wanted to know what those possibilities were, because he would like it to be a legacy for his children. He said, I would just like the name education to be in it somewhere, because that's what we want to do. I told him when we got to the point of actually proclaiming it as a wildlife management area, for him to think about that. I would bring those back to the commission, and we were sure we would take that action. I would also just mention, I mentioned it would be primarily for these hunts. In our estimation, there's probably a possibility for some statewide season on small game hunting, but because of the size of the property, the big game hunting will probably be limited to these special hunts for outdoor recruitment for youth and so forth. I also wanted to mention that we talked, because of where it is with the Buffalo River that borders the property, it's also a great place to do officer training with the bunkhouse already there. So we envision it to be a place where we'll do small game hunting, big game hunting, especially recruitment, officer training, and still utilize it as an education program for local schools who've already been out there and used it in the past. So that's kind of what we see going forward, and he certainly made a great gift in order to be able to do this.
Thank you, Director Carter. As we said yesterday, this is the good stuff. It's fun to bring this before the commission. Yesterday, the Budget Committee voted and approved unanimously the purchase of the what's now known as the Buffalo Ridge tract of Beasley property. On behalf of the committee, I recommend approval of a budget expansion of $3,750,000 as part of the fiscal year 16 for the purchase of 1,703 acres, if I've got that right, Barry.
That's correct.
Motion has been made on the budget expansion for $3,750,000 and seconded by Commissioner Swan. Any discussion from the commission? Any from the audience? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Financial report, Ken Tarkington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There should be a two-page report in your book. I'm reporting through the month of March 2015. On the boating side of the house, we're down almost 6.5%, 6.44% in relation to where we were at this point in time last year. I will say in both boating and wildlife, you'll see the figures begin to come more positive now that we've gotten out of such a cold winter and wet spring and so forth, and we're seeing a little more buying in that area, which is good. On the expense accounts for boating, we're at approximately 50% of the annual allotment. In the middle of the page, Wildlife Fund, we're approximately 4.3% less than the projected for the year. Senior citizen sales for the month were almost 2,700, and the expenses for the Wildlife Fund were approximately 55% of the current year's allotment. At the bottom of the page, the two endowments, the two perpetual accounts, we have Watchable Endowment, which has available $7,932 to be transferred for watchable programs, and the Sportsman Endowment has $40,519,000. I will say that last month we saw a significant increase in the sales of those lifetime licenses, presumably because of the oncoming fee increase. Second page, the wetlands accounts, the acquisition account, we have 11.8 million balance. We've zeroed the maintenance account out as we usually do, and the compensation in lieu of tax is at $824,000. We've yet to receive a certification from the comptroller's office. Tim Churchill is nice enough to kind of reach out and say, we need something. So we may be able to get that certification the next couple of 3 weeks so that we can affect those expenses in this year and get those counties paid those in lieu of tax payments. Are there any questions or comments?
Was that 4.8 million withdrawal? Refresh my memory on the wetlands fund.
It was a myriad of things. It was property, maintenance also. If you bear with me, I can tell you. Fernie Martin McDonald, track, let's see.
So it was all land purchase?
For the most part, $500,000 to F&A for their processing of those. You know, they bill a percent amount on properties we buy. And then we had some maintenance expense in there. Yes, so they're primarily property. Those big dollar ones are going to be property
I just forgotten we
acquisitions.
bought anything that much. And then the compensation doubled?
In relation to what?
Well, at the bottom it says compensation was 424, it went to 824. Maybe you explained that and I was asleep.
Oh, that's just good management. It's kind of, I'll try to make it as short as I can. The fund is identified that we are to receive $400,000 for an allotment. Allotment means you can spend that amount. In the past being probably prior to 6 or 7 years ago, I seem to be able to write a letter to F&A and say, we don't need to, because the funds are transferred from the allotment is transferred from the acquisition fund to the in lieu of tax fund. They don't put money in both. They physically transfer the funding of it from the wetlands acquisition to the wetlands in lieu of tax. So if we only needed $300,000 to pay that tax that year, or that in lieu of tax, I would write a letter saying, please transfer $300,000. And then it became automatic. Since the 400 was how it was originally identified, they automatically transfer 400 every year. Well, after a while, it tends to build up. And so right now we have, as you can see, in the month of January, that's when Finance Administration transferred $400,000 from the acquisition to the in lieu of tax, increasing the amount that we have to pay those in lieu of taxes. And this year we're probably going to be, is Tim here? Well, good, I can make up something. He won't. We're probably close to $400,000 in total payments.
So basically, they transferred the money before you paid the taxes. So once you pay the taxes, the 400 will go back to.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Swan?
Excuse me, last month, when we were talking about lifetime license, Commissioner Watson brought up an issue about how many regular license sales yearly that we're losing off of that. And we discussed some ways to try to identify how many of those lifetime licenses sold were actually being used. And I had talked with Director Carter about the possibility of having a little pin that, you know, when you give your kids or grandkids a lifetime license, when they harvest their first animal or catch their first fish, they get a little pin or a button they can wear so that we would know they were using it. have you guys come up with any other ideas on how to identify how many of those 105,000 lifetime licenses are actually being used?
No, sir, I've not. I don't know if,
Let me, go ahead, Director Carter.
In talking about that, that was certainly one of the ideas that was looked at. We don't have a complete plan yet, but next month, Mark Duda, who's a social scientist and surveyor of primarily wildlife agencies, has offered up his help, of course, with a fee, and that's what we're still looking at, to do several different types of surveys for us to help us recognize how many people are in the churn, as he calls it, going in or out of the hunting community. So I don't have an answer for you yet, but it's certainly underway.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Swan, in fairness to the staff, we didn't see it, but I know a lot of work went into preparing for that government ops hearing. There was lots of options that had to be gone through. They didn't have time, and I can personally testify to that, but it has not been forgotten.
Yeah, well, it's not the end of the world. I was just curious.
Anything else, Ken?
no, sir.
Any
That's
other
it.
questions
Thank
for Ken? Two other things that are not on the agenda, this is just very brief. I believe we've had a dream of our communications equipment getting out of the bag phone age for a lot of years. And when I first came on the commission, Major Ripley was just showing me how bad a shape we were in. That dream appears to be becoming a reality, and it's probably going to be one of the greatest expenditures that we've had at an agency in some time. So next month, I'm asking Darren Ryder to present to you what exactly this new communications equipment is. We'll probably have a budget amendment, but it will be related to the next fiscal year, but its time is coming. You all deserve an explanation and a presentation when we're going to spend particularly those kind of dollars. So that'll be at our June meeting. The only other thing, Commissioner Baker wanted to be recognized.
Yeah, I'd like to, I've been spending some time, I've talked with Bobby Wilson some, and more importantly, I guess, on the construction side, I've spoke with Dwight Hensley. I have a vision that for us as a commission, something I'd like for us to look at long-term. When I've traveled all around the country to fishing bass tournaments, our ramps and our user facilities here in the state of Tennessee are not up to par with a lot of other places we go. We don't have as many, say, ramps where we can park 150 trucks and trailers, or have 3 ramps wide where you can fit a lot of boats in a hurry. I would like to see us as a commission before our budget meeting, I'm kind of propping this up before our budgets go into effect. Dwight's got me some information together. I would like for me and you, Commissioner Cannon, since your engineering background, you know a little bit about it, my construction and Dwight's, I'd like for us and anybody else that would be interested in talking with us, I would like to see us put a long-term plan, a 10-year plan, and try to absolutely have earmarked money that we say we're going to create a facility, because we have some of the greatest lakes of anybody in the country. I would like to see all our big major reservoirs have facilities so the public could have big fishing tournaments. You have big holiday weekend coming this weekend. You know how crazy the boat ramps are. The same facilities, I feel like if we could pick out and do one project a year, if it's $500,000, we budget every year for the next 10 years, we take a small bite out of it, and it goes all the way through. I think we would be improving an infrastructure that we're not improving right now, or we don't have it earmarked for. I'd like for the commission to think about that, and hopefully support me on that idea.
Thank you, Commissioner Baker. Mr. Chairman, that's all the Budget Committee has.
Thank you very much. I apologize at the beginning of the meeting. I usually recognize our special guests. And Mr. Boyd from Department of Ag, thank you for coming. And Mr. Crabtree, we appreciate the invitation last night, and we really enjoyed the fellowship up at the barn. So Thank you very much. Any other comments from the commission? Any from the audience? Director Carter, you got any closing remarks?
Just a couple of things, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to mention, just to get it on the record. I guess I could. Yes, a couple of things too. Commissioner Baker's comments that he just made, you might remember there was a bill floating around in the legislature this year that was looked at pretty seriously, that was brought forward by the Marina Association, that would transfer money to our account primarily to base toward facilities. I don't know where that will go next year. It wasn't a TWRA bill, it was actually from the Marina Association, but it would fit perfectly into what Commissioner Baker was bringing forward. The other thing I just wanted to mention, I know we talked about it yesterday in terms of the significant success that Senator Lamar Alexander pushed forward for us and not only us, primarily us, but also a little bit for Georgia, to keep the federal hatcheries running. And I'd be remiss if we didn't also thank TVA in that, because they weren't forced into making that contribution to keep those running. So we owe a great debt of gratitude to both Senator Alexander and TVA. And as Commissioner Cox mentioned yesterday, we'll make sure that they know that from you all. And we're, again, kind of considering at the June meeting a formal resolution from the commission thanking both of those, and we'll try to bring that forward. And this coming weekend, of course, is Memorial Day weekend, and it's already been mentioned what that's going to be like. It's an extremely busy weekend for our people, especially on the water folks, that they're doing things as boating. I hate to call it boating season, but it is primarily the peak time of the year when people start to get back on the lakes and waterways. So just urge caution for everybody, but at the same time, hope our people do well in terms of safety and use, and just want to mention that's a huge, big weekend. And the last thing, I want to just formally thank our folks yesterday and today, especially yesterday, going through the season setting process, how they put the information together that he got here. But I just thought they did an outstanding job of presenting that to you all and making it as a very complicated and long process as short and succinct as they could, but at the same time not losing any quality. So just want to mention that and thank them publicly, and thank you all for your patience as we went through that, and I hope the weekend does well for you as well. Thank you.
I'd like to echo Director Carter's sentiment to the agency. It was a trying season setting, and there's a lot of changes made, and I think we've protected the resource and improved some opportunities, and I really appreciate all the work y'all put into it. So our next meeting is June 26th. That is a Friday, one-day meeting here in Nashville, be at 9 a.m. If nobody else has anything, we'll stand adjourned until then.
Guys, if y'all are gonna get